I'm not teaching, I am publicly learning. But hi and welcome to Learning for the Life in the UK test part 144. R.A. Butler. That's on page 54. While you're doing Pilatic leg training, and if you participate in the Pilatic leg training, that is at your own risk. So let's start. And we're just having one leg out, straight with the next foot. You can't see it. And you just lift the leg up. And when you bring it back, and you can touch the floor shortly when you bring it back up. So, R.A. Butler. Let's just go shortly back. So, squalor means misery or poverty. So, in the Beveridge report, which was made by William Beveridge, you can guess it, it was commissioned by the, I don't know what commission means, commissioned by the wartime government under Churchill in 1941. And it came back and it said, in 1941 came it back, and it said that 5 giant evils should be fought. And that how the Beveridge report was the foundation, basically, provided the basis of a modern welfare state. And these 5 giant evils which should be fought by the government are want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. And now we know that squalor means misery or poverty. So it makes sense. Misery should be fought or poverty should be fought. The government should work to end misery and poverty. Now with the other leg. The foot is flexed and we're bringing it up and again back. So the government should fight want. I still don't understand that. Disease, that makes sense. We should fight diseases. And ignorance. I understand it in a way that it means education. The people should get education. Squalor means poverty or misery. So the government should fight poverty or misery. And then idleness. I don't really know what it means. I understand the word, but I don't really know what it means here in the context. R.A. Butler, 1902 until 1982. Richard Austin Butler, sorry, I have your name. Richard Austin Butler, R.A. Butler, Richard Austin Butler, and later then Lord Butler, the same as Beveridge, William Beveridge, later Lord Beveridge. And the next leg, the next exercise, we're having the leg out with a flexed foot, and we bring the leg in, something like that. So Richard Austin Butler, he was later Lord Butler, was born in 1902. So Richard Butler was born in 1902. He became a Conservative MP in 1922, the same as Winston Churchill was. So he was a Conservative MP, a Member of Parliament, in 1923. And that is an oversimplification. There's again an asterisk. I'm not so sure about what year he became an MP. And he held several positions before becoming responsible for education in 1941. And now we're doing the same with the other leg. Leg straight out with a flexed foot, and we're bringing it in. So he became a Conservative Member of Parliament in 1923 and held several positions before becoming responsible for education in 1941. So that means he had multiple different jobs. Maybe he was one time responsible for whatever, and then for something else. I don't really want to just say something. So he was doing multiple different things. He was responsible for multiple different things in the country, and then in 1941 he became responsible for the education. In this role, he oversaw the introduction of the Education Act 1944, often called the Butler Act. We're talking about Richard Austin Butler. Now the leg is up, and we're having this at the knee bend with a flexed foot, and we're bringing it up and again back. So the Education Act 1944 is often called the Butler Act, and that introduced free secondary education in England and Wales. We will get something for the other areas, but first, so that introduced free secondary education in England and Wales. We're not going to explain that. Yes, we're a little bit of primary, but I guess that means primary education would be the first few years until the age of 10 or something, 4, 5, 6 years at the beginning, and secondary education would mean then later on education. And then over the other leg, flexed foot, bend at the knee, and then up, would mean 5, 6 years more. But I don't think it means in adult life education that is anything free there. the education system has changed significantly since the Act was introduced. So what we're getting here is a little bit changed, but we're going to explain now what has not changed. But the division between primary and secondary school that it enforced still remains in most areas of Britain, which introduced free secondary education. Now, was there, technically it could be understood like that, but there was just one education going for 10 years, and now we came and split it, make it primary and secondary. I don't think that means that. We're having the upper leg out, and up in the sky, and we bring it to the outside, and again in with a flex foot. I think it means, first of all, only, let's say, 5 years of education, and now he added, you're getting all 5 years more free education. And the education system has changed significantly since the Act was introduced, so it's not the same anymore in the schools. But the division between primary and secondary schools that it enforced still remains in most areas of Britain. So in most areas of Britain, there is still primary school for a few years and then secondary school for a few years. Now we have a leg out, flex foot, I will bring it to the outside and again. With that we're through with R.I. Butler. And I will only make in the next part Dylan Thomas. So you can technically read again the article just of the welfare state, or we can talk through it, which is maybe better. So, the UK won the war, but the country was exhausted in an economical way, and the people wanted change. It had happened during the war already, significant changes of reforms to the education system, and people now looked for wider social reforms. During the war, there had been significant reforms to the education system, and people now looked for wider social reforms, which is both true, but the sentence doesn't make really much sense. If there were many significant reforms, why did the people now wanted reforms? Now look for wider reforms. So we first had got social education reforms, now we wanted social reforms. So that makes sense. And we're having now the leg again out with the flex foot. They're lifting it up, bringing it to the outside, and pointing shortly to the floor, and then bringing it in and pointing shortly, and tapping shortly onto the floor. So during the war, there were changes to the education system. We had that here. That was in 1944, so during the war, 1939-1945, the Butler Act, which introduced the secondary school. And there were significant reforms to the education system. But here the Beveridge report was already commissioned by the wartime government in 1941. But it was not enforced. In 1945, the British people elected a Labour government. And that was under the Prime Minister Clement Attlee. And there now things happened. In 1948, the NHS, the National Health Service, was by Enorine Naibivan established. Now we have the other leg out and to the outside and pointing, tapping on the floor and back. And also the Social Security to give a system of benefits from the cradle to grave, and railways, coal mines, gas, water and electricity were nationalized. Technically also the independence of multiple different countries, starting in 1947 with India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and then in the coming 20 years. And there's a part of it. The Prime Minister of the day, so the Prime Minister of the 1950s was, for example, one of them, was Harold Macmillan. And he was famous for his Wind of Change speech about decolonization and independence for the countries. Now it was about decolonization and independence, not about education or social reforms. And now we're doing the last exercise. It's a 1-minute plank. Let's make a 90 seconds plank. And we're starting in 10 seconds. We're having, as persons already clean in 5 seconds. And in 3, 2, 1, and start with planking. So as persons Clement Attlee, he was the Prime Minister from 1945 until 1951, and during his time the National Health Service was, for example, done. But we're having as another person, William Beveridge, and he made this Beveridge report in which he recommended to fight want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. And Richard Austin Butler, he introduced the Education Act. He was minister. He became responsible for the education. So he was the Minister of Education, or the Education Minister, something like that. And in 1944, he introduced the Butler Act, and having half, I think. And that introduced the secondary education. Now I don't have anything to repeat anymore. We're having 30 seconds left. We could try to list the William Shakespeare quotes again. These are all the words of stage arts as you like it. To be or not to be out of Hamlet. Once more up unto the breach out of Henry V. And the darling buds of May out of Sonnet 18, shall I compare it to a summer's day? And a rose upon another name out of Romeo and Juliet. And these are 90 seconds. So we are through with the exercises, and we're through with Richard Austin Butler. He made in 1944 the Butler Act, or the Education Act, and that introduced the secondary school. I thank you very much, and until next time.